All right, let's take a look at some more writers of prose here. First one's Jack Kerouac, father of the Beat Generation. Beat Generation was a group of artists from the 50s that rebelled against mainstream values. So a lot of these probably the most extreme thing we've seen yet, drug experiments, radical politics, open sexuality, explicit promiscuity, and an interest in Eastern mysticism. So they moved from New York City to San Francisco's artistically hippie, iconoclastic culture out there. And you know, the connection here with San Francisco and art is very well known if you've spent some time out there or have heard about it. Here's a picture of him. Nice shot there, least formal shot we've seen so far. So On the Road, which is his book, it was the book of the Beat Generation, semi-autobiographical work about a cross-country trip with Kerouac's friend Neal Cassady. And this is played out in the novel as Dean Moriarty. And so they go across some eclectic figures along the way. It's kind of the journey of life. What happens is not important. You know, the randomness of the things you come across as you move along. The narrative style is experimental, stream of consciousness. We've seen that already. This takes it a step further. Non-connectedness of thought, super long sentences, questioning the American status quo, and pushing the limits of expression here in nonconformity, not just with the ideas, but also with the way things are presented. Next writer here, we've got Joseph Heller. He wrote novels, short stories, and drama. Here we have a picture of him. And you may have read this also in high school. His most well-known work here is Catch-22, which has become a common word in English to describe a situation that has no easy way out, a contradictory choice with usually a negative resolution. So the book itself is a third-person, omniscient, non-chronological narration told from a perspective of a couple of different characters here. It takes place during World War II, and you can follow the experiences of Captain Yossarian and other airmen who try to keep things together while still having to complete their service so that they can go home. And to look at how this plays out, the pilot's mentally unfit to fly did not have to, but because of the bureaucracy, they could not actually be excused, so thus the term Catch-22 came about. James Baldwin, our next writer here, was an African-American writer who moved to Paris when he was 24 so he could escape the racism in America. But moving to Europe, here's a picture of him, moving to Europe gave him this vision, being able to write about a perspective from a European and an American perspective. But an interesting writer because he wrote about sexuality before the subject was mainstream in literature. Sometimes he can have a liturgical style influenced by his religious upbringing, but definitely brings up a lot of issues that he personally faced. Notes of a Native Son here, something to note, please, that his combination of essays on race in America and in Europe. And like I said, he had that ability to look at both sides there. Many of his writings explore homosexuality and bisexuality. Giovanni's Room is about an American man living in Paris who tells of his exploits there. Going to Meet the Man is a collection of his short stories about African Americans, crime and justice, childhood and family, sexuality, and racism. And from this book, you should look at Sonny's Blues. So this is about brotherhood, drugs, and personal obligation. And also take a look at The Rock Pile, which is about feelings of negligence and isolation. So two things I recommend you to look at later on. Our next writer here is Flannery O'Connor, a novelist, short story writer of the South. I was in the gym the other day, and there was a fellow in there reading one of her novels, and it sparked up an interest in her. But another writer of the South, we'll talk about that in a sec, but her life was cut short at 39 because of illness. Here is a picture of her. And Southern Gothic style, another grotesque characters, just we've seen in the tradition of other writers that we mentioned here, Eudora Welty and William Faulkner. But she didn't really like that categorization in general. She explored morality and human behavior, but also influenced by a Roman Catholic faith. She wrote 2 novels here, and she has other books of short stories that should be looked at, and she won the National Book Award in 1972. In the short story Revelation, you can see a visible religious context, something to look at there. The title itself reveals that. In the life the life you may save may be your own. There's a negative outcome when a stranger with malicious intentions comes upon an unsuspecting family. And the same thing happens in A Good Man is Hard to Find, with this terribly grotesque and dramatic ending. I think that's the one where everyone's shot. And in Good Country People. So another writer in the Southern tradition here. Her characters are real, grotesque, ridiculous. Just to point out with more explanation what this is about, you could see this, for example, in Good Country People. One character, Pointer, is a Bible salesman. He invites somebody else, Joy, on a date. He coaxes her up to the barn loft where she then removes a prosthetic leg at his request. He opens out a hollowed-out Bible and takes out some whiskey, condoms, and sex cards. She refuses his advances, and he runs off with her prosthetic leg and reveals he's an atheist and a nihilist, which she does not foresee despite her PhD in understanding of belief systems. So, once again, it's got this comical air to it. It's the grotesque figures here with these, exploitive sexuality. Guys, he's a Bible salesman, but he's an atheist. And Joy here, we can just imagine her stuck up in the barn there with these maybe cards scattered all over the place still, with one leg less. So Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird, another one that is covered in many high schools. She won the Pulitzer Prize for this. You should note some of the characters in here, how Scout tells us about Atticus Finch, a lawyer in the South who defends an African American against an undeserved rape charge. And just published, interestingly, here's a picture of her with President Bush. But interesting about this is she wrote another one, Go Set a Watchman, in 2015, which was actually written way before that they rediscovered. I think it was somewhere I read it was the first draft to To Kill a Mockingbird. I just bought that myself, and I'm going to give that a read soon on. Toni Morrison, this is the only writer I think that I have mentioned here that is still alive. She won the Pulitzer Prize, the American Book Award, and the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1993. And here's a picture of her. You may have recognized her name. You probably have read some of her novels. The Bluest Eye is about African-American Pecola Breedlove's suffering around her desire to have white beauty. It's told from various perspectives, such themes as incest, racism, and child abuse. Very deep themes in here to read about. Some of her other well-known novels are Sula, Song of Solomon, and Beloved. Beloved is a Civil War story about subjection and choice in slavery. John Updike. Take a quick look here. A novelist, poet, writer of short stories. Multiple times won the Pulitzer Prize. And his work started appearing in the New Yorker in the middle of the century. Here's a picture of him. And so this is something to remember about him, this Rabbit series, Rabbit, Run Rabbit, Rabbit Redux, Rabbit the Rich, Rabbit. They're books about Harry Rabbit, a middle-class man over several decades, from young man to tomb, and you can follow these, and the publications are over the years, and you can see the development of the same series. And I think his kids wrote Rabbit Redux, I think it was called, a memoir of the whole experience there. So that ends this section on the prose writers, I believe, and we'll move on to some other types.